All right, let's level up our skills talk today.
Sounds good.
We're going to dive deep into the Australian Core Skills Framework,
The ACSF.
or ACSF for short. You might be thinking, ugh, not another framework. But this one is different.
Yeah.
It's not just a list of skills. It's more like a roadmap to
Hmm.
understanding how you perform those skills in real life.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, a roadmap. And it helps us kind of visualize, where we're good at things and where we need to get better,
Right.
using this idea of a spiky profile.
We're going to get to that a
Yeah,
little bit later. It's pretty interesting.
it is.
Okay, so the ACSF, it breaks down essential skills for Australian life into 5 categories.
Okay.
Learning, reading, writing, oral communication, and numeracy.
Right. The core skills we need.
But here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
It goes beyond just saying, hey, you're good at math, or you need to work on your writing.
Yeah.
It actually looks at how those skills play out in different situations. Like,
It acknowledges that, you might be really good at writing a casual email to a friend,
Yeah,
but then you freeze up when you have to write a formal report for work.
right.
So the context really matters.
Mm.
And the ACSF helps us understand why that is.
So how does it do that? Like, what makes the ACSF different from, let's just say, a list of skills on a job ad?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think one of the key differences is that the ACSF looks at what it calls performance variables.
Okay.
So these are things like how much support you have when you're trying to do something,
Mm-hmm.
how familiar you are with the
All
topic,
right.
and the complexity of the task itself. And these variables can all affect how well you can actually do something.
Can you give me an example of how those performance variables actually, play out in real life?
Sure. Imagine you're trying to read a really difficult scientific article,
Okay.
and you're reading it just because you're kind of interested in the topic. You're at home. There's no pressure.
Right.
You might struggle to get through it, right?
Yeah.
But if you have to read that same article for your job and you have support from, your colleagues, maybe there's a glossary of terms. You might find it much easier to understand, even though it's the same article.
Right.
So it's not just about your reading ability, it's about all those other things as well.
Yeah. So it's like a much more holistic view of how skills actually work
Exactly.
in our lives.
Yeah, and the ACSF gives us this framework for understanding that,
Okay.
which is really valuable.
Cool. All right. So let's break down those 5 core skills a little bit more, starting with learning.
Okay.
It seems pretty self-explanatory, right? We all learn things.
Mm-hmm.
But how does the ACSF approach that?
Yeah, you're right. It seems simple, but the ACSF actually looks at how you approach learning,
Okay.
what motivates you to learn, how you plan your learning, how you change your strategies,
Yeah.
when things get difficult.
So it's not just the
It-
content that you're learning. It's like understanding your own personal learning process.
Exactly.
That's cool. It reminds me of how, some people are really visual learners
Yeah,
and other people are more hands-on.
exactly. And the ACSF recognizes those different learning styles. In fact, there's a case study in the ACSF about a Cambodian farmer named Deng, who is, super skilled at practical tasks, but he struggles with formal learning, especially in English.
Wow.
And it just shows how important it is to understand how people learn best so we can create better learning experiences for everyone.
Yeah, that's a great example of how the ACSF goes beyond just the theory and into the real world.
Yeah.
Okay, what about reading? How does the ACSF approach that?
Well, as you might guess, it's not just about being able to recognize words on a page.
Right.
It's about comprehension, critical thinking, and being able to get meaning from different types of texts.
Okay.
And it also recognizes that, your reading skills might change depending on how complex the text is
Yeah.
and what your purpose is for reading it.
So, somebody might be able to, fly through a blog post about their hobby, but then really struggle to understand, a legal document.
Exactly.
And the ACSF says both of those are valid.
Exactly, and it gives examples of that. For instance, someone at level 2 might find a really detailed scientific report very challenging,
Okay.
but they can easily, navigate a website to find out the latest news about their favorite sports team.
Okay.
So it's about understanding the reader's goals
Right.
and how difficult the text is.
Okay. That makes sense. Now, what about writing? I feel like writing is one of those things that a lot of people get nervous about.
Yeah.
How does the ACSF address that?
Yeah, it can be really intimidating. And the ACSF recognizes that Writing is actually a huge range of skills and tasks.
Right.
It's everything from, sending a quick text message
Yeah.
to writing a complex research paper.
Right.
And it understands that people go through different levels of complexity as they get better at writing.
So it's not like, okay, everybody needs to be a novelist right away. It's like understanding where you are on that spectrum of writing skills.
Yeah. And providing support, to help you improve.
Right.
So, for example, at level 3, the ACSF says that you might be comfortable writing like a workplace accident report,
Okay.
but a formal research paper might still feel really hard.
Right.
So the framework helps us understand these different levels of difficulty and then figure out, okay, what do we need to work on?
Yeah. This is starting to feel like a really good tool for self-assessment.
Yeah.
Like you could look at those levels and say, okay, I'm good here,
Mm.
but maybe I could use some work in this other area.
Exactly.
It's like directions to improve your writing.
Absolutely. And the ACSF also says that it's really important to change your writing style based on who you're writing to
Right.
and what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
You wouldn't write a text message to your boss the same way you would write a cover letter for a
Yeah.
job.
Right. The tone, the language, how it's all structured, it's all different.
It all changes.
Exactly.
So it's not just about grammar and spelling. It's about understanding how to communicate effectively.
Right. The nuances.
Exactly.
Okay. Let's move on to oral communication.
Yeah.
Now, this one seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
It's talking, it's listening,
Mhm.
but I have a feeling the ACSF goes a little bit deeper than that.
You're right, it does. The ACSF says that oral communication is more than just speaking and listening.
Okay.
It includes things like active listening, understanding nonverbal cues like body language,
Right.
and being able to adjust how you communicate depending on the situation.
Okay.
Like someone might be really great at chatting with their friends at a party,
Right.
but then they totally clam up during a job interview.
Totally. Happens all the time.
And the ACSF recognizes that both of those things need oral communication skills, but at different levels.
Yeah, different levels of complexity.
Exactly. And it looks at the differences between those levels in detail. So it talks about something called transactional communication, which is when you're communicating to get something done,
Okay.
like when you order food at the restaurant.
Okay.
And then there's interpersonal communication, which is more about building relationships and understanding other people's points of view.
So like having a, deep conversation with a friend
Exactly.
would be interpersonal, but like haggling over the price of a car would be transactional.
Exactly.
It's fascinating how the ACSF breaks down these different types of communication.
Yeah, it is.
It's cool. And this helps us see why we might be really good at one type and not so good at another.
Yeah. It's not just about being a good communicator,
Right.
It's about understanding the skills you need for different situations.
That's really interesting. Okay, last but not least, let's talk about numeracy.
Okay.
This one, again, seems pretty simple.
Yeah.
It's math, right? But I'm guessing there's more to it than just adding and subtracting.
You are absolutely right. The ACSF sees numeracy as being able to use math in everyday life.
Okay.
So it's more than just basic arithmetic.
Right.
It's things like, understanding data, statistics, and using math to solve real-world problems.
Right. So like figuring out a tip at a restaurant might be one level.
Yeah.
But then calculating compound interest on a loan would be another level.
Exactly. The ACSF knows that there's a range of numeracy skills, just like with the other core skills.
Right. There's a spectrum.
And it focuses on how important it is to apply mathematical thinking to real-life situations.
Okay.
For example, at level 1, you might be good at figuring out the change you get at a store.
Right.
But at level 4, you could be comparing different loans
Mm-hmm.
with different interest rates and making good financial decisions based on your calculations.
Right. So you're using that numeracy to make an actual decision in your life. It's amazing how the ACSF breaks down these, seemingly simple skills into all these levels. And I'm starting to see how you can use this framework, not just to assess yourself now,
Yeah.
but to figure out where you can grow and maybe set goals for yourself.
Exactly. And that's where the idea of the spiky profile comes in. Remember, we talked about that earlier.
Yes, you said that the ACSF uses this idea to show how we all have strengths and weaknesses
Yeah.
in these 5 areas. And I'm really curious to hear more about that.
Yeah, well, the ACSF recognizes that we're all different.
Right.
So instead of assuming everyone is at the same level in every skill,
Right.
It says that we each have our own unique profile.
Okay.
So you might be really good at learning and reading,
Yeah.
but your writing skills need some work.
Right.
Or maybe you're great at numeracy, but you need to improve your oral communication.
Okay.
So the ACSF helps us see these individual differences.
Okay, so instead of saying everyone needs to be good at everything, it's more like, okay, let's figure out where you're strong
Yeah,
and where you need a little bit of help,
exactly.
and then use that to help you learn and grow.
Precisely. And it goes beyond just self-assessment, too.
Okay.
You know, teachers can use the ACSF
Okay.
to make individual learning plans for their students.
Right.
Employers can use it to figure out what kind of training their employees need.
Yep.
And policymakers can use it to understand the skills of the whole workforce.
Wow. This is a much bigger deal than I thought.
It is.
It's not just about individual skills. It's about understanding how those skills all work together,
Yeah.
how they're affected by, different situations,
Mm-hmm.
and how they can be developed over time.
You got it.
That's amazing. I'm really excited to hear more about how this spiky profile idea works in real life.
Me too.
Do you have any examples of how the ACSF has been used to help people understand their own skills?
Yes, I do. The ACSF has these case studies that show this really well.
Awesome.
Let's start with staff.
Okay, let's hear about staff.
Okay, let's hear about staff.
So staff was offered this amazing opportunity, right?
Oh.
To train to become a supervisor at our company.
Oh, wow.
And she was super excited and enrolled in this certificate for and frontline management.
Okay.
And when they assessed her skills using the ACSF, it turned out that she was a really strong learner, but she needed some help with reading and writing,
Okay.
especially, the formal language and the more complex texts you often find in management.
Right. That makes sense.
So the ACSF really helped to pinpoint, where she needed extra support.
So she could do well in the program.
Exactly, like having a personalized roadmap for, improving her skills.
I like that. Personalized roadmap.
Yeah.
Okay, so what about, you said there were other case studies.
Yeah, there's Emil
Okay.
who wants to be an electrician,
Okay.
and he is amazing with numbers. Okay, good for him. That's important for an electrician, right?
It's essential, absolutely. But when they used the ACSF to assess him,
Yeah.
it showed that his writing skills could use a little bit of a boost
Go.
to be able to handle all those technical reports and all the documents you need in the electrotechnology program.
Right. So again, the ACSF helped him to focus on a
Exactly.
particular area.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It helps you see where you can make the biggest difference.
Okay, cool. What about the last case study?
Yeah, so there's Dylan, a 17-year-old who loves horticulture.
Oh, cool.
And he has what we call a spiky profile,
Yeah.
different levels in all 5 skills.
Right.
So the ACSF helped to figure out exactly what he needed to focus on
Okay.
to succeed in his horticulture units.
That's really interesting. So all these case studies really show us that, we all have our own strengths
Yeah,
and weaknesses.
right.
I bet our listeners are thinking, okay, this is all great,
Mhm.
but what does it mean for me? Like, how can I use this ACSF in my own life?
It's a great question. And while, yeah, educators and employers can definitely use it, it's also super helpful for just assessing yourself.
Okay.
You could think about your own spiky profile, your highs and lows,
Okay.
and then use that to make smart decisions about your learning and career.
So someone could look at it and say, okay, I'm really good at oral communication,
Right.
but I need to work on my writing.
Exactly.
And then they could use the ACSF to find resources or courses
Exactly.
to help them in those areas.
You got it. It puts you in charge of your own learning.
That's awesome.
Hmm.
So let's say you're thinking about a career change
Okay.
and you see a job ad and it's got this long list of required skills.
Mm-hmm.
Using the ACSF, you can kind of look deeper into those skills
Exactly.
and get a better idea of what they might actually involve on the job.
Absolutely.
So instead of just seeing excellent written communication skills,
Yeah.
you can think, okay, based on the ACSF, this probably means I need to be able to write reports and emails and maybe even presentations for this job.
You got it. It helps you break down those generic descriptions into real world stuff
Right.
and see if you're a good fit.
That is so helpful. I think, a lot of people get intimidated by those lists on job ads.
Absolutely.
And the ACSF can really help us understand them.
Yeah, it gives you a framework
Okay,
to break it down.
cool. So beyond those practical things like choosing a job or figuring out what training you need, the ACSF also really pushes this idea of lifelong learning. So you're saying learning isn't just something you do in school or uni and then you're done.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
about knowing that we can keep growing and changing our whole lives.
Right.
And the ACSF gives us a way to do that
Okay.
by helping us understand our strengths,
Okay.
see where we can improve,
Hmm.
and then find opportunities to get better.
So it's like a personal trainer for your brain.
Exactly. You assess your current level, set some goals, and then make a plan to improve.
I like that. And just like with physical fitness, it's not about reaching some finish line and stopping.
No.
It's about challenging yourself to keep learning,
Yeah.
adapting, and getting better over time.
You got it.
That makes me think about how fast the world is changing right now
Mm.
with technology, new industries popping up all the time.
Absolutely.
The ACSF seems like a really useful thing to help people navigate those changes
Yeah.
and make sure they have the skills they need.
Absolutely. And here's where it gets even more interesting.
Okay.
The ACSF doesn't just exist on its own.
Okay.
It's designed to work with another important framework,
Okay.
the Australian Qualifications Framework,
Yeah.
or the AQF.
Right, the AQF. That's
Yeah.
like the big overall picture of qualifications in Australia, right?
Exactly. It covers everything from high school diplomas to university degrees to those vocational certifications.
Right, all the certs.
And while the ACSF levels don't perfectly match up with the AQF levels,
Okay.
you can use the ACSF to kind of get a sense of what skill levels you generally need for different qualifications.
Oh, okay.
So let's say you're interested in getting a Certificate 5 in business management.
Okay.
The ACSF might suggest that having level 3 reading skills would be really good for succeeding in that program.
So if I'm thinking about doing a certain qualification, the ACSF can help me make better choices about my education and my career.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And beyond those specific qualifications, the ACSF also encourages us to remember how these skills all work together.
Yeah.
It's not like they're all separate.
Right. Being a good reader can make you a better learner.
Right.
And communicating well can make your writing better.
Exactly. It's about developing a whole set of skills
Mm-hmm.
so you can be successful in every part of your life.
I like that, a holistic approach.
Exactly.
Okay, well, we've covered so much today.
We have.
I feel like I've learned so much about the ACSF.
Me too.
It's not just, oh, a boring document, you know.
No.
It's a really powerful tool to learn about yourself, develop your skills, and figure out this whole world of work and learning.
Absolutely. It's been great talking about this with you today.
Me too. And before we wrap up, I have one last question for you. We've been talking about how the ACSF is really for Australia,
Mm-hmm.
but do you think a similar framework would be helpful for other countries?
That's a great question. I think it really shows how relevant these core skills are.
Yeah,
They're important for dealing with modern life no matter where you live.
right?
Now, the specific levels and examples, those might need to be tweaked for different cultures. But the main ideas of the ACSF could definitely work globally.
Yeah, I think so too. Because learning, communicating, critical thinking, problem solving, those
Yeah.
are valuable everywhere.
Exactly. And the ACSF's focus on lifelong learning
Mm-hmm.
and figuring out your strengths and weaknesses, that's universal.
Totally. Well, I feel like we've really explored this topic today,
We have.
and I've gained a whole new understanding of the Australian Core Skills Framework. It's not just some boring document.
No,
It's really a powerful tool
it is.
for learning about yourself, growing your skills, and navigating, the changing world of work and learning.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's been great discussing this with you and our listeners.
And to our amazing listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We encourage you to check out the ACSF and see how it can apply to your own life. Remember, wherever you are in your learning journey,
Mm-hmm.
there's always room to grow.
Absolutely.
And with the right tools and the right mindset, you can do incredible things.